Hello, hello. Welcome to episode 20 of Tomes and Tunes. I am your host, Arielle Silver, and episode 20, that means 20 weeks of talking with songwriters about books, our other favorite subject, and swapping songs. And if you are tuning in, let me know where you're coming from and how your day is going. I am very excited to introduce to you a longtime friend and film scorer and songwriter Julian Cassia, who also goes by the artist name, pretty heady name here, Almost an Artist. And let me bring Julian in. Hello.
Hi Arielle, how are you?
I'm good. I could have
me.
sat in the green room with you just chit-chatting, and then I looked at the clock and I was like, oh, it's showtime.
Yeah, you're very good at managing the time and everything. You've always been a very good natural rhythmic person.
That's so funny. You know what I actually did today for the first time since COVID hit, since we sequestered ourselves inside? I put a watch on my wrist. Whoops.
Oh, wow.
There we
Okay.
go. Yeah,
Okay.
I put a watch on. Life has started to get super busy, and I was like, God, I don't want to walk around with my phone all the time. I just need to have my watch, even though all I'm doing is moving from my shed to the house to the shed to the house. But it's like, I got to stay on task.
But you know, they actually have a phone that they brought out. What was it called again? I can't remember the name of the phone. But it's a phone that's just a phone. And the whole idea is kind of a response to that sentiment, right?
Right.
The fact that so many people have this kind of love-hate relationship with their phone because it dominates your life, but it also facilitates your life so much.
Right.
Yeah, I often have conversations with Emilia, my wife-ish, asking her what's her favorite part about like all these technologies and the phone, and I think mine is GPS. I think.
So you actually go places.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like since I drive, I've got a Vespa. I drive around, and even if I go on a bicycle or when I go, exploring the world, wherever you are, there's this amazing thing that you can kind of navigate so fluidly without having to go and ask someone who gives you directions that are tantamount to like, well, you take the seventh right on the left, and then you take the left on the right, and then you go forwards, backwards, and then once you've arrived backwards, you go forwards again and go upwards, downwards, to the left, to the right, and then down the stairs. And you pretend, God forbid, you're high.
Well, I think it's really fitting, actually, Julian, that for you, who now lives in Toronto but has lived in New York City, Boston, London, Paris. Am I right about this?
I sound a lot more English than I am.
Where did you? But you lived in the UK, didn't you, or no?
So I lived a while in close to Glastonbury, and then
Okay.
in Liverpool for a very short time. So probably like a total of like maybe 4 years, I think.
Okay, that's significant.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
And then France also.
Yeah, and I grew up in France. So being half Lebanese, my father was quite linked to France. A lot of Lebanese are Francophile, and are fascinated with France and all things French, including French fries, which are Belgian. That's fun. But good good spokesfoods for freedom. And so we went to France during the Civil War. So that's why I grew up there. Yeah.
And you were born in where?
Beirut.
You were born in Beirut.
I'm really confused.
Well, I just think it's really fitting that the GPS is the app that you find most important.
True.
And I also love that idea of now, what you were just telling me, that now you could just get a phone that is just a phone.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if it has a coil cord attaching to the wall so that you can only move in about 6 feet any direction, and if it also comes with your parents installed in the next room.
that would be a winner, wouldn't
And
it?
maybe a closet right nearby, so you can just hide in the closet and have a private phone call while you're...
Exactly. And a secret girlfriend or boyfriend.
There you go.
That, like you have to hide.
I think we just came up with a great idea.
I know. I think it's very cost effective as well. It's really I can see these going like hot cookies.
Yeah, right. So Julian, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yes,
in
of
terms
course.
of your music, and also I'm so grateful to have you on Tomes and Tunes.
Oh, well, I'm grateful to be here. Thank you, Arielle. Very kind of you to invite me. Well, so my name is Julian Cassia, as evidenced by this titling somewhere. How does that work? There you go, somewhere here. And I go by the name Almost an Artist, which is a sneaky little name. It's a bit of a mantric name, and the idea being to never self-define as an artist fully until the conclusion of your life. So I don't love everything that David Bowie did, but I think that David Bowie is one of those artists that his entire career was kind of pushing his own envelope and doing interesting things, and like kind of not resting.
Yeah.
And I think that he was fully defined as an artist eventually at the close of his life. Even his final album was quite a statement, right? I mean, it's kind of for those of you that might not know, it's the Black Star album, and it pertains a lot to his his cancer that he had, and he did that record whilst he had that going on, and it was released when he died as a statement. So that to me, I find that very defining of an artist. So this Almost an Artist thing is very much kind of a mantric thing for me to never. I've been prone to thinking I had sussed it out and just reminding myself that I still have things to learn. I still have aspects of myself as an artist that need to be more defined, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, wow, this really speaks to me a lot. I just wrote to my mailing list. I write them usually a couple times a month, and my last letter to them was all about becoming, how we're verbs and we're becoming, and just this constant process of becoming. Right? Like,
the continuous metamorphosis, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot about that idea of when we say I am this, when we box ourselves into something. For me, inevitably at some point I push against the walls that I erected myself.
Yeah.
And then I struggle to dismantle them without even fully understanding. Oh wait, I was the one that erected those walls. Who boxed you in here?
No one else to blame, right?
Yeah.
It's a tricky place to be, angered but without anybody to blame.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I mean, especially when you're looking at artists. Right now, I'm in conversation with my sister, who's after the bombings in Beirut, she actually went back to the UK, and so she's doing this. She's a fine artist, and I was telling her about this guy Ari Herstand, who is out in LA, a very interesting dude, right? Who often talks about embracing the hyphenated name for artists. And I think it's a very helpful kind of mental tool to have, right? To not just try and be one thing. As an artist, you kind of have to do that, right? Like, I mean, and it defines in a roundabout way. It ends up defining my life, because I mean, I've got like all these various positions that I do, things that I do, like scoring films, and I book bands for this online live streaming thing. I produce artists. I write songs and I play shows, and all these kind of things. It ends up just being really a hyphenated life. And also, as I was telling you before, teaching in college, so being a professor, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I love the way that you said that, the hyphenated life. Years ago.
Ari said that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Years ago, I came across this woman, Emily Wapnick, maybe it might be her last name. She has a TED Talk, but I came across her before her TED Talk. This was maybe 10 years ago or something, and she called us multi-potentialites.
Multi-potentialites.
Yeah,
it's more poetic.
Yeah, and it's a little bit cumbersome for someone who doesn't quite understand that. Multi-hyphenate is what everybody in Hollywood calls you if you're a writer and an actor and a director and multi-hyphenate. But she called it
fret.
What'd you say?
The septuple threat.
But I loved that idea of multi-potentialite because it almost like your artist name, almost an artist. It really emphasizes the creative energy and the flow of it,
Yeah.
and I guess that's kind of what Ari Herstand is also saying, and same here.
Yeah.
Totally. As a also I teach at a university here and own a yoga studio, and all of the other music things. It's like, oh yeah, like all these different things.
Yeah.
Kind of
What are you
swirling
teaching at
together.
the university, actually?
I teach. I have an MFA in creative writing, and I teach
Okay.
creative writing and also creativity research studies at Antioch University of Los Angeles.
Awesome.
Yeah. And what are you teaching? Are you teaching music and scoring?
Yeah, I was teaching music business,
Yeah.
music theory, music production, and music history. Three of those wrapped into one class that's called music aesthetics here.
Huh.
But I had to stop because, as fate would have it, I've actually been very occupied, and so I couldn't handle the workload of teaching. I just I just had too many jobs.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was that, and it was very cool teaching. Also, music business was cool. I do like just business in general. It's a very interesting ethical business, being this thing that's more pronounced these days. I mean, there's more companies out there that are operating on an ethical level. They seek to be ethical businesses, and it's kind of a big thing. And I find that very interesting. Trying to find, like as an artist, you're always trying to refine like how you're going to make this thing work, make some money, but do things that you don't dislike yourself doing. And thinking in terms of business, I think is very helpful, because most artists don't, and they enter into a business that probably pronounces the worst business model in the world, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the worst business models. I'm going to go into this industry where there's a lot of people. I can get exploited, and like I'm going to get horrible money.
Yeah. The music industry is not famous for its fairness,
No,
especially to artists.
But I mean, it's a supply and demand thing, right? Like, I mean, it's just like
Or
if
an
you don't-
exploitation thing.
But why does the exploitation
Right.
thing exists? That's the question, right? Because if there wasn't a supply of artists that just will do it for free, by the way, there is an exchange. There is a commodity that is exchanged. It's a vanity. We all like being in front of a camera, right? And artists definitely like that. So I think a lot of the time that's leveraged against us. That we will pay to play. Just to play, right? And it's something that gets exploited because there is, and vanity not in that sort of negative term, with that negative connotation, just in the sense that we want to be there on the spotlight, we want to shine, we want to, there's an aspect of us that wants to do that, as well as sharing something, as well as participating in something that's creative and extremely enjoyable and therapeutic.
Yeah, I think that for me that last part, the intrinsic motivation to make music is always, for an artist, I think this is perhaps one of our biggest problems, is that we will do the thing that we do
No matter what.
no matter what, whether there's a fair exchange between us and the audience and us and the label and us and the whoever, or not, because we're so intrinsically motivated to do that thing,
Absolutely.
and yet we still have to exist in the world, which requires money to buy the bread, to pay the
Gluten-free
rent,
bread.
all that stuff. Yeah, so it's a difficult.
It's tricky, and
it's tricky. Yeah.
and thinking of it in business terms, I think is a very powerful thing, because what we just defined here is that there is essentially is no scarcity, right? Musicians, it's there's no scarcity. It's like someone saying you got to pay for pebbles on in the sand. There's so many of them out there, right? Because musicians will do it no matter what. And with that in mind, then how do you kind of work to perceive what is special about your thing and what isn't scarce?
Right.
Sorry, what can be in demand, right?
What's
can
valuable?
you leverage?
Yeah.
What is valuable? What is the thing that you can do that other people might not be able to do, and then leverage that
So I have a
to
question
get the
for you.
bread.
Is it something that what do you think? Is it something that you can do, or is it something that is inherent in who you are that is of value?
Well, that's a really that's kind of at the root of the question, right? Is like, and when I say doing that work on yourself and doing the kind of work to understand that, that's exactly the kind of question you ask yourself. Is like, is it something that's innate in me? Now, so in my case, one of the issues that I faced is that I like all of the musics, and I play and I write them all, and it ends up dividing my attention so that I don't specialize. Right, so I've basically got an Italian restaurant, Lebanese restaurant, French restaurant, Malay restaurant, Ethiopian restaurant, and I'm trying to do all the foods. Just you can't, because eventually you only have so much bandwidth. So asking yourself, okay, so what's the best thing that I do? Always, what is the thing that people respond the best of what I do? Right, I might like all these things, but what's the one thing that people respond?
Yeah.
And like that's tantamount to doing market research, right?
Yeah.
And test audiences and all that kind of stuff, and understanding that. Like for me, for instance, I like when I as an artist, as a songwriter, I've often I just gravitate towards loud music, and that means like singing like Chris Cornell or whatever. And the thing is, most people don't like it when I do that, even though I kind of want to do it. So the soft thing that's like Jose Gonzalez is the thing that people like the best out of me. It took me years to get that.
Yeah, it's that Venn diagram, right? Like,
Exactly.
What do you love? What does everybody else love?
And that's
or
a
what do they
perfect
need?
perfect way of putting it.
And where's
Venn
the
diagram.
overlap? Yeah.
Yeah. So like doing that work to figure out that Venn diagram and getting to it, and then making that sort of all sit together in a way that you can monetize it so that you can buy your bread, is that work that you need to do in order to be a successful business entrepreneur in the world of music.
And the
or
funny
art
thing
of any kind, right?
And the funny thing I'm thinking about now is that on your way to then becoming a successful business, actually you have gotten more clear on your own values, and your value for others, but your own values as well, because you've had to grapple with what is working, what isn't working, getting clear on what is important to you. And so along the way of building a business, you've actually perhaps built a life.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's something in business that's called a core value and living, breathing values, and there's all these kind of terms that pertain to things that essentially you will not compromise in order to do the business that you want to do. And knowing those and having the sort of mental exercise of unveiling them and articulating them to yourselves, just like the same way that when we hear a truism, it articulates something that we might have felt but didn't intellectualize yet. That can be really useful as an anchor point, right? So that you see those values that you have and operate in harmony with them, right?
Yeah, figure out what is negotiable and what isn't negotiable. And it's super important to really get to a point where this part is not negotiable. This is what I'm going to do. This is who I am. This is how I'm going to move through the world. And then where you can be more flexible and kind of, take the job or, teaching, writing, whatever it might be, performing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Julian, I am remembering through this conversation, the very first time we met, I think it was the first time we met, but in any case, it was, I think, the first time that we spent time together, and we were, I think, sitting on the floor in a small room with maybe
the rehearsal room, right?
3 other people or something like that. Yeah, exactly. It was January. It was 2002. And and now I'm remembering through this conversation why we connected that very first time, why we're still in touch all these years later.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome. So you are, would you say you're primarily, among all of the multi-hyphenates, are you primarily scoring at the moment? Are during the time of COVID is really my question.
During the time of COVID,
like?
Yeah. Definitely during the time of COVID. I'm producing a couple of tracks for some people, but it's mostly films that I'm working on. I've worked like since COVID started, I think I've worked on 3 or 4 films. No, 2 or 3 films. 3 or 4 films. Yeah, three or 4 films. Yeah. So
Yeah.
like now I'm.
You've been busy.
And yeah, I mean, because as a film scorer, you're kind of at the end of that chain. You don't have to worry. Like it's not dependent on people filming the film. It's at the end. So I guess, COVID hit and people were still editing films.
Yeah.
Still kind of processing everything, still putting it all together.
Yeah.
And, then they come to, the composer as one of the final steps. And all those things can be done remotely.
Yeah.
And I've been set up to, I've been working remotely for years and years.
Yeah.
In fact, like I'm in Toronto, but most of my work still comes from the US. Even production, like when I produce artists, it's just, I did a whole album earlier on this year. We're in 2020, right? Yeah. Earlier on this year in New York, and it was just mostly just me making the record here. And then I flew out and recorded the vocals in New York, and
Yeah.
But yes, primarily at the moment, very much film scoring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like this. I like that idea of being able to live where you want to live.
Yeah.
And
Tell me about it.
Travel to the places where you need to travel to. But then, this works. This energy of working out of my own space really fits with me, with my
Yeah.
own, my own vibe.
No, of course, and then you actually, you're paying rent for something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, rather than like just sleeping there. Totally.
I remember when we were in Boston, I used to I'd had these existential moments where I wondered why I paid rent, because I spent zero time in the places that I was living in. I was always
Yeah.
just out and about. And that's a lot on the account of my golden retriever type of energy, as I was
Right.
saying with Arielle before. My wife-ish calls me a golden retriever because I'm generally upbeat, like a golden retriever. But yeah, so now I feel like.
By the way, for
Go
people
ahead.
listening, you keep saying wife-ish, and so
Yeah.
I just want to say we had a short conversation about that before we went live. But do you want to explain what that means?
Yes, so I called her my wife-ish because, for all intents and purposes, we live together, we're about to have a baby together, we're together, we're married, but we haven't gotten married because we don't have a strong, we're not strongly connected to the idea that it has to happen. But also partner sounds like a business partner, so I use partner actually often, especially up in here in Canada. It's
Yeah.
the term that's used, but that's why I said wife-ish, because it feels warm somehow and romantic and sweet.
Yeah,
and,
yeah, it is
but,
sweet.
Yeah.
How would you say it in the other languages that you speak?
Ma femme-ish.
That sounds like you're really hungry.
Yeah, exactly. I'm famished. Femme is
Femesque?
my wife, my
Maybe
femesque.
femesque?
Yeah, my femesque.
Yeah.
I guess maybe.
Yeah.
Marti. How do you say it in Arabic? Marti. I'm not sure. Italian. I don't know. It mostly coming to me in English.
Yeah. So I have a really important question to ask you.
Let's do the important question.
What have you been reading lately?
So I've been reading a book about what's it called again? It's on my phone, which I'm using as my webcam, so I can't look it up. But it's what to expect. It's a famous book about when you're expecting for kids.
Yeah.
I'm kind of the
What to
beginning of
expect
it.
when you're expecting?
Yeah, well, exactly. That's the one. What to expect
Yeah.
when you're expecting. So there's that.
Classic.
This is a classic that every once in a while I reread. I absolutely love.
What is that? Oh, yeah, Milan Kundera. I was a
Yeah.
huge fan of his. Yeah, I read a lot of his books
Yeah,
in my
he's-
20s.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, so I read his books as well back then. I read, I think, pretty much all his books.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And I reread them, and they hold up, huh? Like it's not that like you're 20 and you're like, ooh, oh,
Yeah.
cool stuff.
Yeah.
You reread it and you're like, fucking hell, man, this guy's he's got a
Yeah.
he's got an incredibly observant mind.
Yeah.
So
I still think about some of his concepts, but in side by side in my mind, I think of I don't know which book it is. It might be Unbearable Lightness of Being, but I don't think so. Where it begins with a gesture with a woman at a pool. I think about the idea of gesture a lot from him, but side by side in my mind, I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because it's been a long time since I've read his books, but he's a bit of a misogynist. His women are never portrayed well.
Yes, for sure. He's Czech of that era of time, and he. It's actually been oftentimes when I've discussed him as an author. It's something I imagine men have an easier time to read because it doesn't have that angle on it, and I noticed it because I didn't really perceive it until I had those conversations with women that he had that aspect to him because it's very male oriented. But the thing that interests me in his writing is just the observation of how he's function as beings. Like I always loved that. But yes, it's true.
Yeah.
That is true.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I'm embarrassed to admit that I did not notice it either, and perhaps that is until another woman pointed it out to me, and I think that speaks highly of the type of society that we live in. That as a woman, 100%. I was reading it and I was not even aware of the misogyny.
No, 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
At the age that I was reading it, but the reason I was attracted to his writing is because of the ideas that he would present. So I totally understand.
I mean,
very philosophical.
Very philosophical and super observant and granular about how we function to sort of like theater of our minds and how it functions. I found him fascinating. But it's interesting you say that. Recently I don't know if you've ever caught the book. I think it's a podcast and then they did a TV show. Dirty John.
I don't know it.
Very, very interesting. I mean, it's dark. It's messed up. But it there's a second season that they did. It's on Netflix, at least in Canada. And it's all about this woman who ends up killing her husband. And the first, it's interesting because the first episode opens up and, they're in litigations and everything. And she's like smashing her car in his house and all these kind of things. And she's nuts, right? And she, the lawyer's like, hey, you're going to get a great deal. Can you take this deal? She's like, no, not going to take this deal. And he's like, and it painted as her being very unreasonable. Happens in 1984. And as the story unfolds, it's really interesting because it just, from the second episode onwards, you start to see how her husband really was just an absolute asshole. and leading her to madness, because it was an era of time where men operated in that way. And the thing that I found kind of bananas was that I recognized that world because I'm from that world. Like that's when I was a kid. Also, I'm half Arab, and that's still a thing in the Arab world, right? Like it's more so. It's very patriarchal still.
Right, like the misogyn or the like machismo kind of.
Very
culture,
much,
right?
yeah, very much. I mean, like it's. I'm really happy that my sister and my niece, are in the UK now because I mean they were living in Lebanon and my niece is 16, and she was dealing with those themes. She's a kiddo, like it's, it's kind of living in Canada, living in New York, living wherever. It's wild. There's still a ton of issues, but it's wild to think that people would operate in that way. And so this show I found was really interesting because it reveals it, and you see how he was such a awful person to lead her to this madness. And a lot of it was the fact that she was blackmailed because she was a woman, because she had no power in that time, right? So like that mindset, that kind of existence, it's not that far ago. I mean, it's not that long since Henrik Ibsen and the Dollhouse, right? Like, I mean, that's 60s, right? Like when he starts discussing, these ideas of objectifying, woman as trophies, as these
Yeah.
marital trophies that you have. And it's something I think about a lot in my relationship, how we have this very egalitarian, I mean, I don't think it could be any other way. Amelia is extremely strong as a person. But we live in this era of time where people do that more often. And still, we're still dealing with all sorts of things. I mean, I see Amelia struggle in her work, like there's still so many places where she's penalized for being a woman. So we're on our way to something better, but we're not there yet. But we've come from something that's just a disastrous mess where a woman wouldn't necessarily notice that Milan Kundera is a misogynist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. A friend of mine and I were talking just earlier this week about she was mentioning she went to music school and in New York, and she was talking about one of her professors, and she had gone to his office hours and to discuss something, and he noticed something in the way that she said something, and it was in that meeting that he suggested that she take a women's studies class, and he had just noticed the internalized misogyny somehow in her communication, and he was like, you should really take a women's studies class, and she was like, no, why would I do that? But then she did, and it just opened up her world. And I was reflecting on my own experience in college, and I don't know if anybody ever suggested that I take a women's studies class. I never did. And it's possible that nobody suggested it, but it's very possible also that I dismissed the idea if someone had suggested it because of, my own internalized stories.
No, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
And especially when you come from that era of time, when you come up in that period of time, it's so normalized.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So did you have a passage from The Unbearable Lightness of Being that you were...
I can't find it, but I have, I know the quote very well. So I think I'm just gonna, even though like I haven't, it's underlined like crazy, but I'm gonna say the quote and then discuss what I find so beautiful about it. The quote is when the mind, when the heart speaks, the mind finds it indecent to object. When the heart speaks, the mind finds it indecent to object. And I always connected to that because as a very heady person, I've often fallen prey to my own sort of intellectualizations where I would give them credence over the actual harmony that we seek as an animal, and I find that that's something that we often fall in the trap of, right? We don't give enough credence to the harmony. We seek being right as opposed to being harmonious.
Yeah. And
I think that's he articulates it in a beautiful way, and it's a moment in the book where, he the primary protagonist realizes that he can't argue against this perhaps illogical emotion that's coming up because it's just a beautiful expression of humanity that is in this other character.
Yeah.
And I find that so often, like if I'm having an argument, especially in an argument, and you have the performance in your mind of being right, and I find arguments very interesting because, they have 3 acts to them, right? They have the build-up, they have the argument, and they have the third act, which is often where you assimilate all the information and realize, oh, I should have said this, or realize actually maybe I'm an asshole, maybe I do that, maybe I should spend some time thinking about that. But in the moment of the argument, you might stick to your guns. And the other person perceives that you think that because they're not there at that third act, which is an internal act inside your mind, and remembering that it's not about being right. It's actually in these human relations. It's actually about how do you live harmoniously, because being right doesn't make you happy. Being harmonious makes you happy, right? Feeling happiness is contentment, whatever you might,
Right.
whatever alchemy of all those emotions might be that make your life a sweet place to dwell in, are really what makes existence sweet. Not being right. I know a lot of people that are right a lot of the time and they have hectic lives.
This is
Right.
interesting that you keep using the word harmonious. I want to tell you something, which is so, it just plays right into this. A friend of mine, he's a professor, he's a neuroscience professor up at UC Fresno. He and I went
Nice.
to undergraduate college together. And when I was a psychology major and trying to understand how the eyeball works, he was the one who kind of helped me to understand. So he was a great teacher even back then when we were just classmates and friends. Um, but he and his research graduate students did a study a number of years ago, and he had come down to LA and we met for drinks one night, and he was telling me about this study that has now been published. They took test subjects, two people in a room, and they asked them to take opposing points of view on a topic and to basically argue. And they recorded the argument into audio software and then eliminated the words and just had the sound waves and pretty much analyzed the sound waves for the interval between the two people, the pitch between their
Okay.
voices. And then they also brought two people into a room and asked them to agree on a particular topic and have a harmonious conversation. And what they found was that when people are arguing and in dissonance in terms of position with each other, they're actually dissonant in pitch in
They're
their
tritoning?
voices. Yeah, well, to
That's-
varying degrees, but
that's
yes, essentially dissonant.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Wow.
and
How cool.
and when they are in agreement with each other, they are harmonious. They are sometimes in unison. They are sometimes in octaves.
That's
They are
really
sometimes in
interesting.
fifths. But they are in, kind of a stable harmony with each other versus a dissonant relationship. It's fascinating, and
That is fascinating. Yeah.
and I have-
Neuroscience. You've done it again.
yeah, totally. So I just want to give a shout out to Lauren Locks. Lauren, if you are watching this, I thought it was a brilliant study, and I think about it all
That's
the
amazing.
time,
Yeah.
especially
That's
in terms of.
really, really, really interesting.
And then I wonder if it happens the other way around as well. If someone who is attuned to music, has sensitivity to pitch, versus someone who is tone deaf, for example, if they would just unintentionally just clash personality-wise, because the person who is attuned to to music and to pitch, and this other person who is not, they can't harmonize together,
Yeah.
and I wondered if just on a really subtle psychological level,
Absolutely, yeah.
if that sort of thing is, if people are at odds with each other, sometimes you just don't click with someone and you don't really know why. You're like oil and water, and maybe it is like that.
Maybe. I mean, it's this neuroscience is such a fascinating field, especially
Yeah.
that. I mean, we're in a moment in history of neuroscience where we're making all these incredible discoveries one after the other,
Yeah.
and these kind of stories, like, I mean, just pick up any book on neuroscience, right, and you just start like just gorging on them. But I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's quite incredible how much all these things have to do with one another. In fact, I was going to play one song, but like now that we've had this conversation, I'm going to actually do another one because
Interesting.
it deals with some of that.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, let me read a passage from a book
Yeah,
that I'm
yeah,
reading,
yeah.
and then let's hear that song.
Sounds good.
This might be a left turn though, because this is totally different. I am always kind of reading a few different books at one time, but this is one of the books that I'm reading right now, The Bluest Eye, by Toni Morrison. I don't know why, I can never find exactly the camera spot, but I'm reading The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. I'll just read this little
Beautiful
passage.
cover.
Yeah, it is a beautiful cover. What is I'm always interested in what's under the book jacket. I kind of like just the plain the plain covers as well.
Yeah.
Let's see here. It had begun with Christmas and the gift of dolls. This speaks a little bit to our conversation earlier. The big, the special, the loving gift was always a big blue-eyed baby doll. From the clucking sounds of adults, I knew that the doll represented what they thought was my fondest wish. I was bemused with the thing itself and the way it looked. What was I supposed to do with it? Pretend I was its mother? I had no interest in babies or the concept of motherhood. I was interested only in humans my own age and size, and could not generate any enthusiasm at the prospect of being a mother. I'm recognizing that this is interesting that you have a baby on the way, Julian. But motherhood was old age and other remote possibilities. I learned quickly, however, what I was expected to do with the doll: rock it, fabricate storied situations around it, even sleep with it. Picture books were full of little girls sleeping with their dolls. Raggedy Ann dolls, usually, but they were out of the question. I was physically revolted by and secretly frightened by those round, moronic eyes, the pancake face, and orange worm's hair. The other dolls, which were supposed to bring me great pleasure, succeeded in doing quite the opposite. When I took it to bed, its hard, unyielding limbs resisted my flesh. The tapered fingertips on those dimpled hands scratched. If, in sleep, I turned, the bone-cold head collided with my own. It was a most uncomfortable, patently aggressive sleeping companion. To hold it was no more rewarding. The starched gaze or lace on the cotton dress irritated any embrace. I had only one desire: to dismember it, to see of what it was made, to discover the dearness, to find the beauty, the desirability that had escaped me, but apparently only me. Adults, older girls, shops, magazines, newspapers, window signs, all the world had agreed that a blue-eyed, yellow-haired, pink-skinned doll was what every girl child treasured. Here, they said, this is beautiful, and if you are on this day worthy, you may have it. I fingered the face, wondering at the single-stroke eyebrows, picked at the pearly teeth stuck like two piano keys between red, brow-line lips, traced the turned-up nose, poked the glassy blue eyeballs, twisted the yellow hair. I could not love it, but I could examine it to see what was it that all the world said was lovable. Break off the tiny fingers, bend the flat feet, loosen the hair, twist the head around, and the thing made one sound, a sound they said was the sweet and plaintive cry "Mama," but which sounded to me like the bleep of a dying lamb, or more precisely, our icebox door opening on rusty hinges in July. And I'll leave it at that. I love Toni Morrison's writing. I've been reading her this summer and just really enjoying her quite a lot. Oh, I think we lost you, Julian. Are you? Oh. Is your audio still in?
No, my.
Oh, there you go.
There we go.
You're back, sort of.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what happened. That's using the phone. So. Yeah. Opa. That is crashing all over the place, huh? There we go. Let's hope that doesn't crash anymore. All right. So yeah, that's a very interesting passage. Lots of unpack in there, right?
Yeah, and it goes on, and I was reading it earlier and just thinking, gosh, how much of this can I get away with reading on the show? And just a little piece, I guess. But it's so good, though. I love Toni Morrison. She just she kind of picks a point and then drills down into it and examines it like, every fabric of it, every little piece of it. And just the detail at which she does that is fascinating to me.
How old is the protagonist at this point in the story?
I cannot remember offhand how old she is.
But roughly, a kid or?
Gosh, yeah, she's somewhere between. Yeah, she's still a child, under 12. I can't remember if she's 8 or somewhere around there. Yeah.
But it really does kind of. I mean, it's not much of it's a turn, but it's also very much related to what we were talking about earlier on, right? Like,
exactly.
The whole sort of self-defining, the expectancies, the objectification, right, which is right in front of you, and objectifying yourself into this mirror, right, that cycles back into you, that feeds into the sort of that feedback loop of identification.
And I should also say that Chandra asks, what book is it? It's The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. And so the protagonist is black, and so she's talking about these white baby dolls that people give her. And so there's also that, there's so much to that.
Mm.
So I had just glanced at the time, and I could talk with you for years, and hopefully we will continue talking for years.
We have been talking for years.
Will you play a song? Can we hear what song
Absolutely.
you're thinking about?
I'll actually play for you a song. So let me go and get my 1 second. I'm gonna go and get this other guitar. Might have to tune it. All right, I cannot hear anybody right now. So let me just give myself an E. Ooh-la. That is weird. So this is, as I said, it's a different song than hello?
Hi.
Yeah, so as I was saying earlier on, I was gonna play another song that's I'm sort of half finished with, but I figured I'll play this song because it kind of speaks a little bit to what we were talking about. A song called Michelo. I used to be sneaky. Oh.
I've been listening to this song a lot.
Right on. So I used to be sneaky. Well, it's the only song that I think I've released, right?
You also have Paradox.
True, which I'd like to remix, but that's
They're
something
both so good. Honestly,
Thank
I
you.
listened to both of them on repeat.
Thank you,
They're
you.
really good.
I'm glad. But Michelo is, I used to be sneaky and I used to not tell people this because I wanted to, like, hey, see what people saying. But it's actually a song in a fictitious language. And it's very much about just feeling the song, right? So like, even though I always spoke English when I grew up, because nobody else spoke English in France, you didn't talk about lyrics. It wasn't a thing. So you just kind of feel songs, and you'd feel what they were about. And in French, there's a saying "chanter en yaourt," which means singing in yogurt, and it's just like like Ameshnano, Manorano, Anivana, and you just like kind of like sing sort of what it's supposed to sound like. So people would spiritually really connect these songs, but they wouldn't necessarily understand them, and that informs how I approach this song, because usually I'm really heady about my lyrics. I spend an eternity on them. I torture myself, and it's this very kind of painful birthing. And this one I was like, alright, fuck it. I'm just gonna sing this thing that sounds a certain way, just as an experiment, to see like what it makes people feel. And different people have told me different things about like what they think the subject matter is, and that's kind of this little game. So maybe in the chat window you can put what you feel would be the thing, right? So anyway, this song is called Michelo. Michelo, Michelo, tasse, Michelo, Michelo, tasse, Michelo, Michelo, tasse, como lo la fe. Aniba mita, aniba, aniba mita, aniba, aniba mita, aniba, como lo la fe, como lo la fe. Oh, me la l'illusion. Como va Tarazan? Oh, me la l'illusion. Como no la fe. se, Michelota se, Michelota se, como lo la fe. Anita, Aniba, Aniba, Mita, Aniba, Aniba, Mita, Aniba, como lo la fe, como lo la fe. Oh, me la illusion, como va a oh, me la illusion, como lo la fe. Michelota se, Michelota se, Michelota se, como lo la fe. Aniba mit, Aniba, Aniba mit, Aniba, Aniba mit, Aniba, como lo la fe, como lo la fe. Oh, me la l'illusion, como va ta razón. Oh, me la l'illusion, como la fe. Michelota se, Michelota se, Michelota se, como no la fe. Aniba, Mita, Aniba, Aniba, Mita, Aniba, Aniba, Mita, Aniba, como no la fe. Whoa, whoa, oh, whoa, oh, whoa, I think it was distorting there a little bit. Sorry about that.
No, it sounded great in my
okay,
ears.
It was okay.
Yeah.
I was like,
yeah. No, it sounded great from here. Oh my gosh, I love that song. Thank you for playing that.
Thank you
So,
very much.
So you said that it's totally made up language. Do you sing it the same way every time?
Yeah. Yeah, there's like lyrics. I can write them out.
Yeah.
And somehow there's like a mix of all the different languages that have been around in my life, but like, you know, it's like some bits sound French, Spanish, like even some African languages like patois, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there's sounds like a long lost love song or a song about a homeland. Yeah, right. Yeah. But it's interesting. Like, I mean, I'm curious. I'm curious to see how different people might intuit something. Like, I had there was something about an injustice in there, like,
like
human struggle, like, you know.
I'm thinking about The Stranger, Camus, like just now when you said that,
awesome.
A struggle, like all of a sudden I had that picture of
interesting
the beach and
interesting l'étranger, yeah. Okay, that's a cool. That would be if they ever make a movie, maybe I'll consider it a track, you know.
Oh, I just I just thought of a book that I want to share with you, but I cannot. I'll have to do it after the show. Yeah, I'll have to do it after the show. It takes place in Morocco. It's written in French. I translated it when I was in grad school. I studied literary translation for a little while, and
so it's some small tasks, right?
yeah. But I think it's something that I want to share it with you. But I am blanking on the name right now. So well. Thank you for playing that song.
Oh, absolutely, it's a pleasure.
Yeah.
You were gonna play a song, no?
Yeah, I'll play a song and then we'll say goodbye.
Yeah, I'd be curious because I think it's like 55, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Do you have to?
Time flies. No, I'm okay.
Because you're having a baby in about a half hour, I think.
In
right?
in a couple of minutes. Yeah.
In a couple of minutes. That was an interesting
the water broke, but
email exchange that we had.
Yeah.
I really thought you meant like the baby was going to be delivered at 6:30 today.
Yeah, it's like the world of technology nowadays. You can really tell things on a very, very accurate level.
I was like, wow, Canadian healthcare, man. That's some good stuff.
Exactly. You
Right,
CBD oils and everything.
Yeah. We'll see if I can keep my headphones on my head. They've been slipping off.
They're sneaky sometimes. Like
I know. Okay.
Do you need me to press mute so I don't?
Oh, yeah. I can do it for you.
Oh.
There we go. But you can mute and unmute yourself as you like, so I'll actually leave it alone and let you do that.
Okay, so I'll mute this so I don't make, there's no noise on your end.
This is not a made-up language. Ooh, ooh, ooh. I'm gonna have to discard these entirely. So don't say anything. Don't talk. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Stood out in the cold, the end of an old year. A sprinkling of snow, a noisemaker blow. Your face reflected gold and red. You lit your cigarette, and for a second you were late. And I could navigate your sky, steer through 1,000 storied miles, sail through miracles and trials. We never saw spring, you never stopped drinking. I searched in the dark, stayed looking too long. I saw your spark and thought of stars that shine 10 billion years. 'Cause for a second you were late, and I could navigate your sky, steer through 1,000 storied miles, sail through miracles and trials. You were right. All our uncharted waters clear, all of our faults and fractured nights were beautified. Ooh, 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 ooh. I saw your spark, thought of stars that shine 10 billion years. 'Cause for a second you were late, and I could navigate your sky, steer through 1,000 storied miles, sail through miracles and trials. You were late. All our uncharted waters clear, all of our faults and fractured nights were beautified. Ooh, ooh, ooh. You were light. Ooh, ooh, ooh.
That's really beautiful, Arielle. That's a lovely song.
What'd you say, Julian?
I said it's beautiful. It's a really lovely
thank you.
song. Yeah.
And it was inspired by the idea of namaste, which is right?
Okay.
When people say the light in me sees the light in you. And I was thinking about a past relationship and how we kind of lost track of each other's light and, a terrible breakup and all the things. But when I was thinking about the song, I was thinking about this idea of, coming back to the idea of, there's a light that shined in that person and that shined in me, and our own, shit maybe got put on top of it and obscured it from each other, but that doesn't mean that light doesn't still exist inside of each person.
Absolutely.
And it's also a great way to end a conversation with you as that idea of namaste and your light.
And namaste, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you
Namaste
so much,
indeed.
Julian.
It's absolutely a pleasure. Thank you for having me. It was lovely to meet all you people online.
And the archive of this will be on YouTube, and it'll still be on Facebook, but I think they're easier to find on YouTube. So, so thank you so much, Julian. Everybody, please, I put his links to all of his stuff in the description of the show, so in the show notes. Julian, one question before we go. Are you performing online? Can people catch you anywhere?
I have not. I performed recently via this thing that this online portal, but I don't have any plans at the moment. I'm working most of the time and eagerly anticipating a little girl. Back and all these themes that we've discussed are definitely on my mind because I'm gonna have a little girl. It's gonna be an important thing which is so that wasn't the question though. No, I'm not performing. I might in the future. When I have a moment to kind of sit down and do that.
When you have a moment, sometime around when she's
Almost
perhaps when she's around 7 or 8, hopefully before that.
And we also recently got a little puppy as well, so
Golden retriever, I hope.
It's actually a golden. Well, they call them golden cockers, but I find that name very awkward, so I call them a golden spaniel.
Okay, a bit of a mix.
A bit of a mix, yeah. Well, he's a big dog. He's a lovely doggy as well. Yeah.
Julian, thank you so much for joining me today.
It was lovely to see you.
Yeah, you stay right there. I'm just gonna say goodbye to the show, and
sounds good.
We'll catch up. Thank you all for joining me, for joining Julian and our discussion. This was a fascinating talk about culture in so many different ways, and just absolutely loved it. Join me next week. I have Rachel Solomon, Nashville artist, and also very well known for her weekly, I think just once a week, but maybe more frequently, piano shows, and she takes requests. So we're going to have her on the show next week, and she will play an original for us. But Rachel Solomon. And I hope that you stay safe and sound. Until we see you again, I will be live on Facebook and YouTube tomorrow for my Arielle's Acoustic Happy Hour every Friday. And I will see you later. Take good care.